Most women who seem the happiest in the room are often the ones who once cried the loudest in silence. Their laughter is melodic, their presence radiant, their words sprinkled with grace and composure. But their soul has passed through fire. She does not shine because she was spared the darkness, but because she swallowed it whole and learned how to stand without asking to be seen. The mask of joy, though not false, is often built atop buried ache. And the woman who walks into a room lighting up every corner, she is not untouched. She is, in fact, forged. From the outside, she looks like everything a woman should strive to be: confident, magnetic, centered. But if you could peel back the polished veneer, you'd often find a labyrinth of ancient pain she's made a home in. Jung taught that the shadow isn't simply darkness, it is repressed power, forgotten anger, exiled memory. And a woman who radiates joy often learned to build that joy from the wreckage of who she had to be to survive. What you admire in her now, she once feared in herself. Beneath her grace, there is grit. Beneath her humor, sorrow with a sharp edge. Her poise isn't naive, it's practiced. It's what emerges when a woman has faced every voice that once told her she was too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too loud, too different, and instead of folding, she transmuted. This is not surface-level confidence. It is the hard-won aftermath of shadow integration, a woman who knows her demons by name and has learned how to dance with them under the moonlight. But you wouldn't know it at first. That's the paradox. Society teaches you to look for wounds in broken expressions, but the most wounded often wear elegance like armor. And if you listen closely, you might catch the pauses between her sentences, the ones weighted with histories she no longer needs to explain. The world rewarded her when she smiled, but it was the nights she wept with no one watching that taught her who she really was. You might envy her glow, but ask yourself this: do you really want the journey that created it? Her confidence wasn't handed to her in approval. It was carved in rejection. Every compliment she receives today echoes back to the years she was invisible. Every room she commands now is a counterspell to the rooms that made her shrink. This is not the story of a woman who was loved into joy. This is the story of a woman who bled for it. And yet, she forgives. Not out of weakness, but out of mastery. The woman who has done her shadow work no longer needs vengeance. She has alchemized pain into power. She does not flinch at projection, because she's done the hard work of owning her own. She no longer collapses under judgment, because her worth is now self-sustained. Her radiance is not a performance, it is a declaration. So why does this happy, confident woman carry the deepest shadows? Because she stopped hiding from them. She let the wolf out of its cage and met it eye to eye. She no longer pretends to be good by the world's definition. She is whole, beautifully, terrifyingly whole. And wholeness always includes the dark. The animus within her has been refined. No longer an inner tyrant. It has become her sacred masculine, the part of her that acts with precision, clarity, and decisiveness. She is no longer waiting to be chosen. She chooses, not out of ego, but from alignment. And that is what unsettles those who haven't met their own shadow, her unapologetic wholeness. Her joy now doesn't stem from denial, but from depth. It is not positive thinking. It is rooted in having thought the worst and still choosing to love. She no longer needs to prove herself, not even to herself. Her silence can be more powerful than argument, because she's already won battles you'll never see. But here's what no one tells you. The more a woman grows in radiance, the more she is tested, not by life, but by those around her. Projection becomes a mirror she didn't ask to hold. The world will try to make her shrink again. But now, she smiles, not to appease, but to bless herself. She knows that some cannot handle the presence of a woman who has freed herself. And you, what do you see when you meet a woman like that? Do you admire her, or do you try to unravel her mystery for your comfort? Do you celebrate her or compete with her? Because how you react to her shadow-woven confidence reveals more about your own. She's not interested in proving she's healed. She simply is. Her very being becomes a frequency, and those who vibrate with hidden shame will often feel exposed in her light. That is not her fault. That is the shadow at work, not just hers but yours. So, the next time you see her smiling, not for you, but for herself, understand this: she didn't arrive there easily. Her joy is sacred, and her shadow is not gone. It is simply no longer in control. There is a certain stillness in a woman who has made peace with her past. Not the kind of stillness born of fatigue or defeat, but the regal silence of someone who no longer needs external noise to affirm her. She has faced the betrayal of people she loved, the disappointment of hopes deferred, and the crumbling of illusions she once clung to. And through that descent, she discovered the quiet gold hidden in every wound, not as decoration, but as a map back to herself. She no longer rushes to explain her joy or defend her sorrow. Those who misunderstand her are not enemies. They are simply uninitiated in the art of depth. She no longer translates her soul into a language palatable for the shallow. She lets the silence speak for her now. That silence is not absence. It is fullness, and it unsettles those who fear their own. Her laughter carries echoes of times she thought she'd never laugh again. Her strength is made of paradox. The same woman who once begged God for an escape now walks into storms with steady eyes. Not because she is fearless, but because she has learned that fear is a visitor, not a master. When it arrives, she no longer hides. She invites it in, listens to its message, and then moves through it like mist through dawn. Jung once wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But this woman, she dared to look. She dismantled the roles she was told to play. The nice girl, the silent wife, the smiling caretaker. And beneath those layers, she found something raw, holy, and untamed. A woman is never more dangerous than when she stops performing. And the irony is, once she stops performing, the world suddenly sees her. They want to know her secret. How does she remain so composed, so grounded, so magnetic? But what they don't realize is that magnetism is not created. It is remembered. It is what returns when a woman stops abandoning herself. Her eyes don't dart anymore, seeking approval. They remain fixed, inward, steady, anchored. She knows now that most people's perception of her is shaped by their own projections. If they see her as too proud, it's often their insecurity. If they say she's intimidating, it's often their fear of uncontained feminine power. She doesn't take it personally anymore. That is freedom. The woman who carries her shadow with elegance becomes a mirror others may not be ready for. She reflects their avoidance, their repression, their hidden longing. And instead of breaking to accommodate their discomfort, she rises calmly, completely, not to provoke, but to exist. And her very existence challenges the lie that one must stay small to be loved. She does not confuse connection with enmeshment anymore. She knows the difference between being seen and being used. She does not hand over her softness to those who have not earned her trust. Her vulnerability is sacred, not a currency for attention but a gift for the worthy. She has cried enough to know that not every open ear is a safe one. Her femininity is no longer performative. It is sovereign. She wears her beauty, like the moon wears its phases, without apology, without competition. She does not dim herself to make others comfortable. She also does not flaunt to incite envy. She simply is. And in a world obsessed with doing, her being becomes a quiet revolution. She is no longer seduced by chaos. Emotional turmoil no longer feels like love. She used to think passion meant pain. Now she knows peace is the most intoxicating force. The calm she cultivates is not laziness. It is maturity. It is the fruit of having screamed into pillows, written letters never sent, forgiven ghosts, and finally walked herself home. Even her solitude is different now. It is not loneliness. It is intimacy with the divine. She speaks to the silence, and it speaks back. She no longer waits for someone to see her before she recognizes herself. Her own presence is enough. She is not lonely in her solitude. She is luminous. When others come to her, they often come broken. Not because she attracts pain, but because her wholeness calls the fragmented parts of others to remember what is possible. But she does not play savior. She offers space, not rescue. She knows better now than to drain herself for those still addicted to suffering. And when she loves from fullness, not lack. She does not seek to be completed. Her love is not a transaction. It is an overflow. And if that love is rejected or mishandled, she does not crumble. She mourns, yes, but then she recenters. Because her source is not a person. Her source is truth. She has learned that real confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to parade. It doesn't seek permission. It walks into a room and rearranges the energy without saying a word. Because the soul of a woman who has befriended her shadow does not just enter, it arrives. The moment a woman reclaims the parts of herself that were once deemed too much, she becomes mythic. No longer tethered to the expectations of politeness or prettiness. She begins to move like an ancient force, neither soft nor hard, but whole. And in that wholeness, there is power. A silent, undisturbed power that does not roar, but pulses like a drumbeat under the skin, calling back all that was lost or stolen. Her psyche, once fractured by abandonment or betrayal, begins to knit itself back together in secret. Not through external validation, but through witnessing. She sees herself. Not the edited version, the real one. The one who made mistakes, said the wrong things, stayed too long, left too early, bled love into unworthy hands. She does not flinch from that memory. She honors it as part of the resurrection. There is a sacred return that happens when a woman no longer seeks herself in the mirror of another's eyes. She no longer performs femininity for the male gaze or suppresses fire for the comfort of the collective. Her radiance is not contingent on being desired. It is her birthright. She is not dangerous because she's wild. She is dangerous because she is healed. The healed woman is not perfect. She is integrated. She has met her shadow not as an enemy, but as a messenger. And when the shadow spoke, she listened. It told her of all the ways she abandoned herself to be loved. It whispered the truths no one else dared to tell her. It showed her the childhood scripts she kept reenacting in adult costumes. And she, instead of running, turned toward it with trembling grace. You might wonder how such a woman could still walk with compassion. After all, life did not hand her ease. It handed her mirrors. It handed her people who betrayed her trust, so she could learn to trust herself. It handed her silence so she could find her own voice. And every time she begged life to be gentler, life instead gave her truth. And somehow, that truth became her liberation. Do not mistake her kindness for submission. She is kind because she knows the taste of cruelty. She is warm because she remembers the cold. But if tested, she will not shatter. She will clarify. Her boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks she now knows how to use. She no longer offers herself as a lesson to those committed to misunderstanding her. She speaks less now, but when she does, her words land with weight. They are not designed to impress. They are forged from lived wisdom. She has nothing to prove. She knows that validation from others is not a reflection of her truth. It is a reflection of their readiness to perceive it. And so she speaks not to be liked, but to be clear in the spiritual architecture of her being. The shadow has become an altar. She does not shame her rage, she channels it. She does not suppress her grief. She lets it cleanse her. She does not fear her desire. She owns it, and in doing so, she models something rare. A woman who is no longer divided against herself. Her light no longer flickers based on who is watching. It stays lit in the dark, even when no one applauds. Especially then, because she understands that the true test of worth is how you treat yourself when no one is watching. And the woman who keeps her promises to herself in solitude becomes untouchable in public. The ones who try to dim her light are not her enemies. They are asleep. They are disturbed, not by her behavior, but by her freedom. She no longer dances around fragile egos or shrinks in the presence of performative power. She no longer explains her boundaries with footnotes or apologizes for her clarity. She is not angry. She is just no longer accessible to confusion. Even in love, she is different now. She does not fall. She chooses. She does not beg. She invites. And if someone cannot meet her at the level of her self-honor, she does not wait for them to ascend. She blesses them. And why? Because she knows what it costs to betray herself, and she will not pay that price again. What the world once called too much, she now calls sacred. The intensity, the depth, the sensitivity, all things she was once told to tone down, are now the source of her intuition, her discernment, her creativity. She is no longer a trimmed version of herself. She is untamed, not in behavior, but in essence. If you cross her path, you will feel it. Not just her presence, but her history. The unseen battles, the unbecoming and becoming. And if you are wise, you will not ask her to shrink. You will simply listen. Because what she carries is not just personal, it is ancestral, collective, cosmic. And still, with all this fire, she remains gentle. Not because she has to be, but because she wants to be. Because she knows the deepest strength is not domination. It is restraint. She could burn bridges with one glance, but she'd rather plant gardens, unless you give her a reason not to. When a woman has spent years contorting herself into someone else's mold, the return to her natural shape feels both like a rebellion and a homecoming. The first time she says no and means it, there's a quake inside her body, not of fear, but of reawakening. Each time she chooses herself, she unhooks from centuries of conditioning, and even if her voice trembles, she speaks. That voice, once swallowed, now vibrates with ancestral truth. She is no longer prey to emotional predators because she no longer preys on herself. The internal tyrant, the one that whispered, "You are unlovable unless you suffer," has been identified, named, disarmed. The shadow does not vanish, but it becomes transparent, traceable. She can see its roots, its disguises, its invitations. And because she knows her inner darkness, she is no longer seduced by someone else's. Her nervous system, once wired for survival, begins to breathe. She stops performing safety and begins living it. That's the part people don't see. How much work it takes to unlearn a life lived in flight. To teach your body that peace isn't boring, that stillness isn't danger, that kindness is not always a trap. This is the sacred labor of the healed woman. It is invisible and holy. In Jungian terms, she is no longer possessed by complexes. She relates to them. The mother wound no longer puppets her love life. The father wound no longer guides her worth. She can witness her inner child's panic without letting it pilot her choices. This is individuation, not the elimination of pain, but the conscious holding of it without collapse. And through it all, she remains tender, not because she's untouched, but because she is no longer guarded by armor made of shame. She knows that real vulnerability is not exposure. It is sacred visibility. She lets herself be seen by those who have earned the right, and those who haven't, they no longer get access to her softness. This is not cruelty, it is self-respect. Her boundaries are not made of stone, but of clarity. And clarity is a kindness. She no longer hints, hopes, or performs. She tells the truth, quietly, steadily, even if her truth makes others uncomfortable. Especially then, because she's learned that betraying her truth to keep the peace always ends in war, a war inside her body. The men who once praised her for being not like other women now find her presence disorienting, because she no longer plays the shadow role in their archetypal story. She is not the projection of their ideal, nor the scapegoat for their shame. She is sovereign, and men who have not faced their own unconscious recoil from such light. Her friendships have changed too. Surface connections fell away like leaves in winter. What remains are those who celebrate her growth without shrinking in response. She no longer bonds over wounds, she bonds over truth. She no longer entertains gossip disguised as intimacy. Her conversations are altars, not arenas. There is a subtle elegance to her now. Not the elegance of perfection, but of embodiment. She moves through space with the kind of presence that cannot be faked. It's the elegance of someone who has returned to her body after years of living in exile. The kind of elegance that comes from knowing exactly who she is and exactly who she will never be again. You can see it in her eyes. Not just beauty, but memory. Memory of everything she survived, everything she let go, everything she chose to become instead. There is a look in the eyes of a woman who has buried former versions of herself. Not sadness, not even pride, just presence, a calm that says, I made it. She no longer over-explains. She no longer tries to be understood. Understanding, she knows now, is not a prerequisite for truth. Her reality is valid even if no one else validates it. This is the inner throne she sits upon, not one of superiority, but of rootedness. She no longer floats, hoping to be caught. She has landed. When someone tries to draw her back into an old identity, she doesn't argue. She simply does not enter that room anymore. She does not need to prove her evolution. The woman she once was could not survive the life she now lives. That alone is evidence enough. And if they cannot see it, they are not meant to walk with her. And still, she grieves. Because growth always includes grief. Grief for the innocence lost, for the illusions that once felt like hope, for the people who could not walk the path with her. But her grief is not bitter. It's clean. It does not anchor her to the past. It honors it, then lets it rest. This is what it means to evolve. The woman who has known deep sorrow and still chooses joy, that is someone sacred. Not because she's invincible, but because she's integrated. She does not need to erase her pain to smile. She holds both. She walks with both. And in doing so, she becomes more than woman. She becomes myth. In the mythology of the feminine psyche, there comes a time when the woman no longer needs to be rescued. Not by a prince, not by a parent, not even by a therapist. She stands alone on the edge of her own inner underworld. And instead of turning back, This is the night sea journey Jung spoke of. The encounter with the unconscious, the slaying of illusion, the union with the self. It is not poetic metaphor. It is blood, breath, and rebirth. This woman, once a prisoner of expectations, now holds the keys. Not because she escaped, but because she transmuted the very prison into a sanctuary. The chains once wrapped around her heart are now offerings on her altar. She did not wait to be liberated. She became the liberator, and in doing so, she became feared by those who benefit from silence. Her relationship with the ego has shifted, no longer ruled by it. She observes it. The ego used to scream, now it whispers. It once demanded she chase applause, perform pain, avoid rejection. Now, she sees its tricks, and instead of obeying, she breathes. She no longer reacts, she responds. This is how power begins. Not in domination, but in awareness. The masks she once wore, The pleaser, the perfect girl, the strong one, the forgiving one, they lie discarded like old skins. And she does not mourn them. They kept her alive once. But survival is no longer the goal. She wants aliveness. She wants truth. And truth is never found in masks. It is found in rawness, in the places she used to hide. Those around her may not recognize her anymore. That's the price of authenticity, the shedding of roles others became attached to. When a woman stops playing her assigned part in someone else's drama, the cast gets confused. But she does not return to the script. She exits the stage and writes her own. She does not speak of healing as a destination. She speaks of it as a devotion. There are days she still feels the tremble in her chest, the ache in her belly, the memory in her bones. But now she meets those sensations with reverence. She places a hand over the pain and whispers, "You're not a problem, you're a portal." That is the wisdom of the healed feminine. Even the way she works has changed. No longer addicted to productivity for validation, she creates from alignment. Her worth is no longer entangled with output. She does not hustle to be seen. She offers her presence as the product. Her very being has become the message, and those attuned to truth feel it. She is no longer seduced by the shallow promise of good vibes only. She knows that light without shadow is artificial. She has sat with the uncomfortable, held space for contradiction, and allowed grief to teach her about joy. She does not fear darkness, she honors it, because she knows that's where all real transformation begins. And love. Love is no longer what it once was. She does not seek it to fill. She seeks it to reflect. If a connection does not mirror her truth, she lets it pass. Her heart is open, but it is no longer porous. She knows that love without reciprocity is sacrifice, and she will never again make herself the altar for someone else's lesson. Her sexuality, once fractured by shame or performance, is now her own. It is not for sale. It is not for manipulation. It is not a tool. It is a sacred language, and if it is not spoken with reverence, she does not speak it at all. This is not withholding. This is remembering that her body is a temple, not a transaction. The voices in her mind that once called her names, weak, needy, broken, are now silent, or if they return, they are met with clarity. She does not argue with them. She recognizes them as echoes of a past self still learning, and she says gently, "We're safe now. You don't have to shout." That is the essence of self-parenting. She walks through the world differently now. Where she once sought permission, she now seeks resonance. Where she once feared rejection, she now watches for misalignment. She no longer asks, "Will they like me?" She asks, "Does this honor me?" And if the answer is no, she lets it go. Not with anger, but with peace. To those still trapped in performance, she may seem distant. But distance is not detachment. It is discernment. She does not abandon people. She simply no longer abandons herself. And those who confuse her boundaries with cruelty are still worshiping sacrifice as love. And in all of this, she remains soft. But this softness is different now. It is not fragility, it is resilience. It bends, but does not break. It opens, but does not spill. It feels, but does not drown. She is the river and the rock, the storm and the shelter, the healed and the healing. In every line upon her face, there is scripture, not written by men, but by experience. The woman who has carried deep shadows does not wear youth like a currency. She wears time like a crown. Her wisdom is not theoretical. It is earned through silence, through rupture, through rising. She does not seek to be ageless. She seeks to be eternal, in the way a river carves memory into stone. Her lineage lives in her body. The unspoken grief of grandmothers, the silenced rage of mothers, the forgotten songs of daughters, she carries them, not as burdens, but as blueprints. She walks not just for herself, but for the women who were never allowed to, the ones who stitched dignity from scraps, the ones who swallowed fire to keep peace, the ones who died inside long before their names were forgotten. And still, she breaks the chain. She chooses to heal not because it's easy, but because it's holy. She knows the ache of being the first to say no, the first to walk away, the first to speak truth in a room that demanded silence. And though it's lonely at times, she does not retreat, because healing is not just personal, it's ancestral. The woman who walks with her shadow becomes a mystic, without needing robes or rituals. Her intuition sharpens, not through study, but through surrender. She no longer asks the mind for answers the soul already knows. She can hear truth in someone's tone. She can sense lies beneath polished smiles. She sees what is not spoken. And it is this seeing that sets her apart. Those who have not met their own depths often accuse her of being too intense, but she knows. Intensity is not danger. It is presence. In a world addicted to distraction, the deeply present woman feels like a threat. But she is not threatening. She is just awake, and the asleep fear those who refuse to dream their delusions. She has learned the sacred art of letting go, not because she is indifferent, but because she now understands. Not everything lost is a tragedy. Some things are returned to the earth because they were not meant to grow in her garden, and she no longer chases what drains her. She releases it with gratitude, with grace. She speaks to the moon, not in words, but in rhythm. Her body understands the phases. She no longer punishes herself for needing rest, for needing space, for bleeding or feeling or craving. She does not apologize for being cyclical in a world obsessed with the linear. She is the mystery most never understand, and she has stopped trying to explain. There is a strange power in the woman who no longer performs femininity, but embodies it. Not the socially approved version, but the wild, knowing, untamable feminine that births galaxies in silence. She does not ask to be adored. She is not waiting to be chosen. She is not baiting, she is becoming. And those who cannot meet her depth will call her names to protect their comfort. She once believed she had to prove her goodness, that if she were kind enough, pretty enough, helpful enough, someone would stay. But now she knows anything that requires her to prove her worth is already misaligned. Her existence is not a negotiation. It is a presence, and anyone who cannot honor that does not belong in her sacred space. Even when she doubts, she does not abandon herself. That is the difference now. The fear still comes. Yes, the ache, the old narratives, the pull toward people who reflect her past. But she catches it. She pauses. She breathes. And she chooses differently. This is mastery, not perfection, but consciousness. She no longer dreams of being saved, not because she's cynical, but because she has already rescued herself. And now, love is not a ladder out of a hole, it is a dance between two whole people who remember that partnership is not completion, but elevation. She would rather walk alone in truth than sleep beside someone who numbs her light. There is no longer a need to explain her solitude. Her joy in being alone is not sadness. It is sovereignty. She is not single, she is singular, complete, intact. And if she chooses to love again, it will be from this wholeness, not from ache, not from habit, but from truth. To encounter a woman like this is to be invited into a new world, one that doesn't revolve around manipulation, performance, or survival. But to enter that world, you must first enter yourself. And most are not ready for that pilgrimage. So they project, they criticize, they shrink, but she does not. She never will again. She is not here to be palatable. She is here to be real. And reality, when embodied fully, will always confront illusion. This is why she triggers why she shifts dynamics, why she cannot be contained. Because the woman who has embraced her shadow becomes light that burns through pretense. The narrative now approaches the final threshold, the sacred detachment, the phoenix of the inner world, and the quiet revolution of wholeness. There comes a point when the woman who once begged to be understood finally stops asking, not out of bitterness, but clarity. She realizes that not everyone has the capacity to hold her truth, and that's no longer her burden. Some will hear her silence as arrogance, her peace as distance, her standards as ego. Let them. She has learned the painful freedom of being misunderstood and still remaining rooted. Her worth is no longer tied to who stays. She no longer internalizes absence as evidence of failure. When someone leaves now, she doesn't chase, she bows. Because she understands something sacred, what exits her life is either misaligned or complete. She does not cling, she trusts. This is not detachment, it is reverence. And when the ache returns, because it does, she no longer panics. She holds it, she strokes its spine, she asks it what it needs. She has become mother to her own soul. And the woman who can self-soothe in darkness is the woman who will never again bargain for love with her own silence. She recognizes now that there are many who are addicted to her light, but allergic to her boundaries. They come to drink her energy, her attention, her warmth, and flinch when she says enough. But she no longer feels guilty for withdrawing. She has retired from being a source for the emotionally starving. She is not a well for those who refuse to learn how to dig. Even the future no longer frightens her. She used to script it, chase it, manipulate it, beg the universe to confirm her dreams. Now she listens, she waits, she plants, she waters, she trusts the mystery. She no longer performs faith, she embodies it. She no longer fears the unknown. She meets it like an old friend with new eyes. The mirror is her ally now, not her judge. Where once she saw flaws, she now sees stories. Each line on her face is a verse. Each scar a symbol. She no longer tries to edit herself into someone else's fantasy. She has reclaimed her reflection, and in doing so, she has rewritten the narrative of what it means to be a woman who survived herself. Even her rage has evolved. It no longer explodes. It burns clean. It no longer seeks revenge. It seeks truth. She does not raise her voice anymore. Her energy speaks volumes. And those who cannot hear it were never listening. She does not teach people how to treat her. She decides, and they rise, or they leave. She has become discerning with her joy. She no longer throws pearls into unworthy hands. Her joy is not for entertainment. It is sacred. It is something she guards, nurtures, protects. And when she laughs now, it is not for approval. It is a sound only real ones recognize. Because only those who've bled like her understand that laughter is a resurrection. She has no need to convince anyone of her goodness. Her integrity speaks in the life she lives, the peace she carries, the way she no longer engages with chaos. She does not explain her healing anymore. She simply lives it. And that quiet consistency is louder than any performance ever could be. When others fall into old patterns, gossip, manipulation, self-pity, she does not follow, not because she's better, but because she's done. She blesses them. She moves on. This is not superiority. It is evolution. It is a refusal to keep rehearsing roles she has already outgrown. And even when loneliness brushes her skin, she does not confuse it with lack. She knows now that being alone does not mean being empty. In fact, it is often in solitude that she hears God the clearest, that she remembers who she is, that she breathes without borrowing air from someone else's lungs. When she chooses love again, and she will, it will not be because she's incomplete. It will be because she's overflowing. She will not choose from fear, but from fullness. And if the person standing before her cannot meet her in truth, in presence, in reverence, she will walk away barefoot into the night and never look back. Her softness has teeth now. Her heart, still tender, is no longer fragile. She is not hard, but she is holy, not because she followed rules, but because she broke spells. She does not wear her healing like a crown. She wears it like skin, invisible, unshakable, hers. This is where all shadows are sanctified, all illusions dissolved, and the woman is finally returned to herself, not as someone healed, but as someone whole. There is a soundless ceremony that happens in the soul of a woman who no longer waits to be chosen. She walks differently now, not faster or louder, but deeper. Her steps no longer seek direction from the noise of the world. She is guided by an inner compass carved through fire. It doesn't point toward comfort, it points toward truth. She does not decorate her days with distractions anymore. She has lost interest in proving her existence through productivity. She is not a machine of achievements. She is a keeper of presence. When she rises in the morning, it is not to race the sun, it is to honor it. Her life is no longer measured by milestones, but by alignment with self, with spirit, with soul. The applause has grown quiet. The crowd has dispersed. But she does not feel empty. She feels clear. She understands now that the crowd was never the destination. It was the detour. The real journey was always inward. And now, in the hush of solitude, she meets the self that was buried under years of performance, perfectionism, and pleasing. She is no longer seduced by the promise of more. More love, more beauty, more validation. She knows that insatiability is not hunger. It is trauma. And she has fed herself truth, long enough to know the taste of sufficiency. She is not starving anymore. She is nourished, and a nourished woman becomes unshakable. Where once she craved a mirror, she now becomes one. Not to reflect vanity, but to awaken truth. Those who stand before her feel it, the invitation to rise or retreat. She does not lower her frequency to maintain company. She rises, even if it means walking alone, because solitude is no longer exile. It is sanctuary. Even in the face of loss, she does not collapse. She feels, deeply, profoundly. But she does not drown. Grief is no longer her captor. It is her teacher. She lets it walk beside her, not inside her. And with each passing wave, she becomes more fluid, more alive. She does not avoid the ocean. She becomes the tide. She no longer asks if she is too much. She asks, is this space too small? Because a woman who has returned to herself no longer shrinks to fit. She expands unapologetically, beautifully, without warning. And if the room cannot hold her, she does not apologize. She finds a bigger room or she builds one. Forgiveness, too, has changed. It is no longer a performance. It is not forgetting. It is not tolerating. It is remembering clearly and still choosing peace. She no longer holds bitterness, not because she condones the wound, but because she won't be anchored by it. Her freedom matters more than revenge. She trusts herself now. That is the final shift. She no longer defers to others for confirmation. The knowing that once flickered in her gut is now a fire she tends to daily. She hears her intuition, not as a whisper she doubts, but as a song she follows, and when the world tries to mute it, she sings louder. There is no need to punish or perform anymore. She has nothing to earn, nothing to chase, nothing to prove. She is not becoming someone. She is returning, and that return is not flashy. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, like the moon reclaiming the night sky, but it is powerful enough to move ocean. She no longer explains why she left the old life behind, the life of self-sacrifice, of shrinking, of surviving. She simply lives in the new one. Her joy is not manic, it is rooted. Her peace is not temporary, it is cellular. Her power is not borrowed, it is ancestral, cosmic. She does not seek to be everything to everyone. She seeks to be real with herself. And in that reality, she finds something timeless, something holy, something no one can take. She has become the woman her younger self dreamed of. Not perfect, but free. Not adored, but awake. Not accepted, but whole. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.